The reason we know that Hamas did what they did on October 7th, they strapped GoPro cameras to their heads and they videotaped themselves raping, slaughtering, beheading, massacring women, children, and elderly people. They boasted about it online. They boasted about it in phone calls. They boasted about it as they took the naked bodies of young women and paraded them down the streets of Gaza, beating their dead bodies. So, this guy has zero credibility.
Hey, everyone. So Piers Morgan sat down with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, this week, and they covered a lot of ground. The Hamas ceasefire deal, whether Hamas has any future in Gaza, Iran, and Israel's collapsing global popularity. That was only part of the interview, and it's the clip I'm going to play you. Huckabee says a lot of things I agree with. He also says a couple of things that I think need more elaboration, need more layers of understanding. So let's get right into it. I'm going to play this in pieces and stop where I have something to add. Okay, let's start with the clip. Let me pull it up here. Where am I? Sorry, everyone. Here we go.
Let's just turn, if I may, to several other issues which are probably more in your wheelhouse. One is the deal that's been announced with Hamas. I interviewed earlier the official spokesman for Hamas, who seemed to be going along with the idea this was a deal that could potentially work, whilst at the same time persisting in saying, for example, that on October the 7th, nobody from Hamas committed any crime or deliberately targeted any civilians, and if anyone did, it was a mistake.
Hamas as liberation organization, we never commit crimes. We never kill civilians. We try all the time to liberate our home from the
Well, that's
occupation.
complete nonsense, Mr. Hamad. Sorry, I have to interrupt there. When you say you don't commit crimes and you don't kill innocent civilians, we all saw what happened on October the 7th in 2023. You had 3,000 members of your organization, Hamas, pour over the Israeli border and commit a series of despicable crimes in which you massacred innocent civilians all over Israel. You then captured over 250 of them, including Holocaust survivors and a baby. So the idea you've not committed crimes is ridiculous.
No. I say 100%. I'm confident that 100%. We never commit crimes against civilians. Maybe some mistake happened, but it is not the policy of Hamas. It is not the
Well, there weren't mistakes. You gunned down innocent people. Sorry, again, Mr. Hamad, I'm sorry. I can't let you get away with saying that. Hamas deliberately massacred people at a music festival. Hundreds of young people enjoying a music festival. That is a war crime.
Very well. There was no commands to kill civilians or to kill women or to kill children. I think maybe some mistakes happened, but I think that
not a plan, which obviously were abhorrent blood libels that he was spewing. And it made me think I listened to this guy. He was the one who, after October the 7th, went on camera and said, we're going to do this again and again and again, and said they were wedded to the annihilation and destruction of Israel. Can Israel do any deal with Hamas? Is there any point that you could actually trust Hamas, which many view to be a terrorist organization, to be any kind of body that you could do a deal with?
Well, first of all, they are a terrorist organization. They've been designated.
Before we go on with what Huckabee actually answers here, I want you to notice what the Hamas spokesman did there. I obviously cut that in where Piers mentioned that he had just spoken to the guy. I pulled in the clip from earlier. It's in the same episode of Piers Morgan. Now, you notice he didn't say that the GoPro footage was fake or that the phone calls home boasting about how many people a certain terrorist killed, calling home to mom and dad, which actually happened. He didn't say that that didn't happen. He just asserted that, oh, this is all a mistake. They weren't commanded to do so. And it's a problem because the evidence says otherwise. There was a report that came out recently, the Civil Commission report on October 7th called Silence No More, that was released this year. And it was endorsed by everyone from Hillary Clinton to Sheryl Sandberg to former Israeli Supreme Court President Aaron Barak. And it's a pretty substantial report with a lot of experts and documented evidence materials recovered from the attackers' bodies. Arabic to Hebrew phrase books were found, meaning phrase books for the attackers on October 7th were given to them that included phrases, commands prepared in advance: take off your pants, lie down, spread your legs, that were carried alongside kits of zip ties and other materials to restrain victims. And in this report, it refers to these as kits that were used for kidnapping or rape. They were displayed at Israel's Return to October exhibition. So saying that it's not a mistake and not a plan is, I mean, there's obvious evidence. Besides the fact that we know this already, I'm just saying, even if you wanted to dispute this on the point of evidence, but there's also a religious dimension to this, which we have to point out here, because this guy Ghazi Hamad goes on TV and says, no, we're a liberation organization, and of course mistakes happen, but the same report cites Hamas-linked religious material that was circulated before October 7th, declaring that every Jew, including women, the elderly, children, the unarmed, are to be treated as a combatant. Okay, that's not a fatwa about sexual violence specifically. It's something more basic, a doctrine, meaning they were told, the attackers were told that the entire civilian population has no protected status and is all to be viewed as combatants. So when this guy gets up and says, we never gave them instructions to attack civilians. I mean, not that I have to prove to you that a Hamas guy is lying. I just wanted to give you stronger talking points if you ever wanted to argue this point over and above what Mike Huckabee is about to say. Look, when you look at what Hamas says, this guy, Ghazi Hamad, who is a spokesman for Hamas, a member of Hamas's political bureau, went on Lebanese TV and said on camera, and he said it in Arabic, so I'm just going to say to you, this is a quote of what he said on Lebanese TV. He said, Israel is a state that has no place in our land. We must remove it. We are not ashamed to say that with full force. We must teach them a lesson. We will not do this again a second time. I'm sorry, we will do this again, meaning October 7th. He said this right after October 7th, like a week or two later. He said, we will do this again a second time, a third time. The Al-Aqsa flood, that's their name for what happened on October 7th, he says, will not be the first time. It will be the second, the third, the fourth, because we have the resolve and the capacity to fight. Yes, we are willing to pay the price. We are the nation of martyrs. We are proud to offer martyrs. We don't want to harm civilians, but there were complications on the ground. There was a festival. There were residents in an area nearly 40 kilometers wide. The existence, listen to what he says, the existence of Israel is illogical. Israel is what creates all this pain and suffering and blood, not us. We are victims of the occupation, full stop. So no one should blame us for what we did on October 7th. On October 7th, on a million Octobers, everything we do is justified. This is a guy saying, everything we did on October 7th, we're going to do again. I'm not translating this loosely for effect. This interview was documented by MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute. It was reported by many different media outlets. You could look it up. Look up Ghazi Hamad, October 7th, and you'll find it pretty quickly. You can watch the video with subtitles on that. And here's the same guy on Piers Morgan denying it all. Okay, let's watch what Huckabee answers here.
Designated that way. The United States certainly has designated them that, so is Israel, and I think most civilized countries in the world would. The reason we know that Hamas did what they did on October 7th, because they were proud of it. They were so proud, in fact, that they strapped GoPro cameras to their heads and they videotaped themselves raping, slaughtering, beheading, butchering, massacring women, children, and elderly people. That's how we know they did it. And they boasted about it. They boasted about it online. They boasted about it in phone calls. They boasted about it on the videotape that they shot. They boasted about it as they took the naked bodies of young women who had been kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival and paraded them down the streets of Gaza, beating their dead bodies. So, this guy has zero credibility. And I think that it's very important to understand that if there's any way in which Hamas wants to make a deal, the first thing they have to do is what they said they were going to do last October, and that's they're going to disarm and demilitarize. They haven't done it yet. So when they do, then we can take them a little more seriously. I hope they do. It would be a wonderful gift to the world if Hamas did not have weapons, because if they have them, they're just nutty enough to want to use them to slaughter people, particularly civilians and innocent people. They don't need weapons. They need to disappear and go away.
If Hamas do keep their word, which I think is highly unlikely, but let's assume for a moment they do, and they do demilitarize, is there a scenario where the United States and Israel would accept Hamas continuing to be a governing body in Gaza, for example?
Okay, before we get to the answer on that one, let me comment here. Everything Huckabee says is true. And it's good to hear moral clarity like that, but I want to add a piece that people might miss. He says, if Hamas keeps its word, Hamas is not going to disarm. Let's just be very clear. Despite everything you're hearing in the media right now, it's a movement that is built on jihadist, Islamist reading of religious obligation. Giving up weapons is not something they're going to do. It's a form of apostasy, according to them. So every disarmament promise from Hamas is just nonsense. Okay, that's number one. Obviously, that doesn't mean we shouldn't demand it. I just wanted to make it make it clear here. And Huckabee is now going to he's going to respond. Piers just asked him about Piers just asked him about Hamas in disarming and in Gaza.
I don't think so. The president has made it very clear, regardless of what Israel would say. President Trump said repeatedly that Hamas has no future in Gaza. I think they forfeited the future. It would be like asking, would it be okay if the Nazis continued to run Germany after World War II? I can't imagine anyone, I don't care who they are, who would believe that that had any credibility whatsoever. So Hamas has forfeited any hope that they're going to have a role in governing Gaza. What they should hope for is that they would be given some level of asylum, that they could get out of Gaza, disappear, find some place to live anonymously in asylum. But the idea that they're going to govern Gaza, I don't think the people in Gaza would tolerate it, much less the United States or Israel, or hopefully any other civilized country in the world.
Yeah. I actually think that this analogy is stronger than Huckabee's using it for, the analogy to the Nazis, because he's using it as like a kind of mic drop line, like, of course Hamas can't have any role in Gaza. Would the Nazis have been allowed to continue governing Germany? Fine. But if we take that analogy seriously, if we play it out further, it's actually there's even more to learn from it than just a mic drop. Let me explain what I mean. See, Germany didn't stop being a Nazi problem the day the war ended. The denazification of Germany wasn't just a flip of the switch, although, of course, the unconditional surrender was critical and it could not have happened without that. But it took years of a complete overhaul of the education system, war crimes trials that were very public. And honestly, it took a generation to denazify the population. And if you take the Nazi Germany comparison, and I think there's real force to that comparison, then it's also implying something about what we need to do in order to get to a post-Hamas Gaza. And a quick handoff to some technocratic Palestinian council like what's happening now is not going to do it. So that's what I thought of when I heard him bring up the Nazi Germany comparison. Let's move on from here. Okay, we're going to play a few minutes now. They're going to change topics. Here we go.
Let's just pivot quickly to Iran. I spoke to President Trump on Sunday night about this, and he reiterated to me what he was saying publicly, that he was ready, locked and loaded, to launch the biggest bombardment of Iran that the world had seen since World War II. Would that have been a smart move if the president had gone ahead with that kind of strike?
The only person who can make that decision is the president. All of us who work for him trust his instincts. If he says it's time to go, we're going to be behind it. If for whatever reason, in having talked to many people in the Gulf countries, and they urged him to give, as John Lennon would so brilliantly say, give peace a chance, to give one more round of negotiations an opportunity. And he made that decision. So let's see if it works. Let's hope it does. But if it doesn't, I think the president has also made it very clear that there is the military option. It's on the table. And if he takes it, it's not going to be a mild tap. It is going to be overwhelming.
This war has not been going the way Donald Trump thought or the way he was told it would go by the Israelis when they met with him in the White House Situation Room before it began. Would it not be better politically, economically, putting aside anything else, for the United States to extricate itself from this war, claim a victory, do what Trump does very well, just paper over the cracks and just say, look, we've achieved these aims, boom, 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 and just get the hell out of this?
Well, first of all, I was in the Situation Room when that discussion was held, and I do disagree with any narrative that says that the Israelis talked Donald Trump into it. That simply did not happen. Nobody talked him into anything. Piers, you know President Trump really well. You've known him a long time. You know him better than most people who do interviews on TV. And I think it's pretty fair to say that he is not a man that is easily led around by the nose. The idea that the Israelis came in and sold him something is probably just one of the more preposterous things. It was based on the fact that for over 47 years, Iran has been saying death to America. They've begged, pleaded, worked, strived to build a nuclear weapon. And for what purpose? To first destroy Israel. That's always been their goal. That's the appetizer. But ultimately, they've said this for 47 years. Their goal is to annihilate America. America is the entree. And so a lot of Americans may not have even been around in 1979 when the Ayatollahs took power and they frog marched blindfolded embassy employees across the embassy grounds, held them hostage, 51 of them for 444 days. I remember it quite well. And I remember the humiliation that we felt in America. I remember the chanting of death to America, the burning of our flags, and the threats that have never ceased, nor have they ever moderated. I think the president was looking after how can I best protect the American public. The proxies of Iran are already in the Western Hemisphere. Hezbollah alone is in 12 Western Hemisphere countries. The idea that this is some unique Middle East issue or it's only an Iranian-Israeli issue is utter nonsense. These people have ambitions, not necessarily to rule the world, but to destroy every part of it that does not agree with their radical Shia philosophy.
The problem, it seems to me, with this war is that the Iranians have worked out that if you control the Strait of Hormuz and you terrorize your Gulf state neighbors by firing off rockets and missiles at them, thereby destabilizing their business models based around come here, it's sunny, it's safe, it's exciting, and so on, that by working that out in this kind of asymmetric war they've been waging, that has, in many people's eyes, emboldened the Iranian regime rather than dismantled them.
I think one of the problems, Piers, is that the Iranians don't.
Okay. Before we get to Huckabee's response again, let me just comment here. Huckabee saying that, trust the president's instincts, the military options on the table, right? And now he's asked about the Iranians' behavior. Okay, and what Huckabee's going to talk about here is how the Iranians don't think rationally. Okay, so let's watch what he says here. I just wanted to pause and kind of sum up because it was a lot there.
Don't think rationally. They don't think in a way that Westerners think. Any attempt to Americanize their worldview or the way that they will approach an issue is fatal on its face. They don't look at life like we look at life, like most of Western countries look at life. They look at it completely differently. So for them, whether this takes 10 years or 1,000 years, their goals don't change. Their methods might get more sophisticated. But I think the president's doing something that is the right way to look at it. First of all, he's prepared to bomb them, but he's also focused on bankrupting them because he knows that if they don't have money, if their economy collapses, if the people get fed up with watching this government, this Iranian regime, brutalize its own people, murdering tens of thousands of them for simply protesting, and then making life miserable for the rest of them, there may come the moment at which the people of Iran say, that's enough. And they're the ones who, if anyone, will take down the regime and give the Persian Empire, the Persian culture, the Persian people an opportunity to once again live free and thrive as they once did, quite nobly.
Final question.
Okay. Let's pick that up. This is Huckabee at his best. And I want to build on what he says. I'm not arguing with it. He's right about that 1979 isn't ancient history, right? It's the founding moment of the regime. And he talks about the humiliation of America, and how the first target of the Iranian regime was the American embassy, was America. But the 1979 revolution wasn't just an anti-American coup. It was and still is a much larger theological project. Okay, Ayatollah Khomeini didn't just want American troops and influence out of Iran. Yes, it was a goal, but he built a governing system around the idea that political authority flows entirely from submission to divine law that can command us to kill and to steal. He said this explicitly. The actual ideology of this revolutionary doctrine that has Hezbollah in 12 countries all over South America, and elsewhere. Huckabee's talking about all the symptoms of this ideology, but I want to push back respectfully on the ambassador on one point, because I think he's actually he comes one sentence away from saying something more accurate and a more useful version of this point. Here, when he says they don't think rationally, so it's comforting, right? But it's also wrong. And it's wrong, and it matters in the way in which it's wrong. We have to stop saying this, saying that they're crazy, or saying they don't think rationally, or that they're crazy. I don't like doing that, because then we stop trying to understand them, because we've just declared them irrational. The Iranian regime is entirely rational within its own framework, and we need to understand its framework. It reasons carefully, patiently, and consistently within its framework. And maybe part of our problem is that we think that they're just irrational. They're not irrational. It depends what axiom you're starting with, because Huckabee said it. The axiom that they laid out in 1979, and it was about bringing down the West. And in a Western liberal framework, legitimacy comes from mutual accountability, from a certain type of freedom, meaning and also there's an assumption in the West of certain incentive structures. Why do people act the way they do? So when we see people responding to different incentive structures and seeking a different type of society that they view as ideal, to us we say that's irrational. But in the framework of Khomeiniist Iran, where legitimacy is all about the revolution, then they're being totally rational. That's my point. And this distinction is not academic. It's very important. I think it has strategic implications, because I've said this a lot, especially lately, that the big obstacle to victory right now is the Americans and the Western media, we could say, but the Americans, but we could also talk about the larger battle against the forces of jihad in the world, but specifically in the war with Iran. The big problem we're having is fully accepting the incentive structure, the goals, the framework of thinking of the other side. And that's why I'm harping on this point, right? Because if you just think you're dealing with people who don't think rationally, you keep expecting them, you might hope that you might think that you can negotiate them out of it, get them to think rationally. The problem is that they are thinking rationally. They have a coherent worldview. Anyway, I'm harping on this point, but you get what I'm saying. Let's watch the last couple of minutes of this, and then we'll wrap up.
Question for you, Ambassador Huckabee, and I really appreciate you coming on the program again. Israel's global popularity has been plummeting in the last 2 years in particular, and notably in the United States, where now nearly 2/3 of Americans have a negative view of Israel. where half the country thinks Netanyahu should be arrested when he comes to the United States. As somebody who is based in Israel, who knows the Israeli people very well, this has got to be a concern, hasn't it? Again, my interview with the Hamas spokesman, one of the things he said is that, however you want to categorize what they did on October the 7th, I view it as a despicable terror attack. He obviously views it as something else. But however you view it, I questioned that the strategy had obviously failed. And he countered by saying, but look how unpopular Israel now is, suggesting that they had in some way provoked an overreaction from Israel, as many people see it, which has made Israel increasingly a global pariah. Does that concern you?
Of course it does, because it's unfair. It's unfounded. It concerns me a great deal because obviously there's an enormous propaganda campaign that is aimed against Israel and against the Jewish people. And I think that's really disturbing to me because the entirety of the number of Jews on the entire face of the earth is 16 million, half of whom live in Israel. The other half mostly live in the U.S., mostly in New York, maybe Miami. But the idea that a people, a very small minority of 0.05% of the population of the world, is somehow the biggest threat to the world, on its face, Piers, that's crazy. I mean, that is the kind of thing that you just scratch your head and say, really? But they are up against a multi-billion-dollar propaganda campaign and a lot of money being spent in the United States on university campuses, on social media. The bots are everywhere, painting a picture of the Jewish people as a whole and the Israelis specifically that is simply absolutely unfounded. And I say that as somebody who's been coming to this country for 53 years, since 1973, who lives here now as the U.S. ambassador and who interacts with the Israelis every single day of my life. And it is appalling to me, the reputation that has been thrust upon them. And it is ridiculously and horribly unfounded. I just want the truth to be told. Israelis aren't perfect. Jewish people aren't perfect. None of us are. But the blood libels that are thrown upon them should be really something that every civilized, every thoughtful, every intellectually capable person, every knowledgeable person would say what you want about the Israelis, about the Jewish people, but these things that are being said, they're just not true, and they're demonstrably untrue.
Ambassador Huckabee, I really appreciate you coming back on Censor. Thank you very much.
So what do we see there? Two things. First, an honesty check on the ambassador's math. He made a mistake and we need to correct it, but it actually strengthens his point rather than undermines it. 16 million out of roughly 8.2 billion people on Earth is right around 0.2%, not 0.05%, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still an unbelievably small number to be treated as history's, the world's central threat. So even correcting the number, the point stands. Second, and this is the part I actually want to lean into, Huckabee is describing this as an Israel problem, right? He says, it's a propaganda campaign specifically targeting the Jewish state, and that's right. And he says, unfounded, it's not fair, and the Jewish people aren't perfect. It's true. But I would have rather that he pivoted the whole argument in a different direction. Because when you look around at what is going on, I think this speaks to the big messaging issue that we have on the pro-Israel side in general with this war. And I've touched on it in a lot of videos here and there, but I really kind of want to say it. Like, what is the big mistake that we're making, in my opinion, is that we need to move the narrative so that people in the West, especially in America, view the war that Israel's fighting not as about Israel. Because, like, I've talked about the fact that Christmas and Easter and churches were also being attacked because of October 7th. Like, people were protesting, and there were protests against the Christmas tree lighting at Rockefeller Plaza and against church services and against Christmas celebrations at Christmas markets in Europe in the name of attacking Gaza, or the fact that Nigerian Christians are being massacred by jihadist Muslims who have the same ideology as Hamas. Meaning the reframing Israel's war against this ideology, focusing in on the religious aspects, the religious fanaticism of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, focusing in on that and that's what Israel's fighting, will bring into focus the fact that the threat that Israel's fighting is the identical threat to the West, meaning make the war in Israel not about Israel. This is what I think we need to do. Okay, so, like the expression, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. That's what I think we need to be talking about more. And so it's not exactly a criticism of Mike Huckabee. I appreciate what he's saying about Israel, but it brings to mind where I think we need to go with the narrative. So let me just give the big takeaway from this video and we'll close it up. Huckabee talked, here's my big picture description of this interview. Huckabee's answers were accurate and honest, but they were about the symptoms. Hamas won't disarm. Iran hasn't changed since 1979. Israel's getting destroyed in the court of world opinion, right? That's all true and it's all important. But almost everything in this interview points towards the same underlying question that does not get discussed, which is why? Why is it like this? Why does Hamas behave this way? What's the underlying ideology? And therefore, when you look at it that way, you start to think differently about things like the possibility of disarmament or the possibility of negotiations, and we think more clearly. Basically, we think more clearly about what's going on when we include an awareness all the time of their ideology, the religious ideology that they themselves say they're committed to. Because when we take it out of the equation and we hear things like disarmament or negotiation, when you hold it up against their religious ideology, you realize how absurd that is. Same thing with the Iranians. So that's why I wanted to focus in on this. Hope this made sense. Hope you found it interesting. And please drop a comment. Let me know what you thought. And we'll keep trying to bring you some interesting content on this channel. Please keep watching. I just got back to Israel today. I'm back in my studio at home, and hopefully we can get back on track with an even fuller schedule of video production. God bless you.